So again, my name my name is Chris Carrod. I am the Professional Programs Assistant for our UMBC Shady Grove graduate programs. Before we begin today with our speaker presentation, I just wanted to give everyone a brief overview and intro to our UMBC Shady Grove operations. So the universities at Shady Grove, or USG for short, is a regional higher education center in Maryland. On this one campus, our over 80 degree programs are offered at both the undergraduate and the graduate levels across 9 universities in the University System of Maryland. Um, all of this is on one campus in Rockville, Maryland, in Montgomery County. And location is everything here on this campus. We are right along what is called the I-270 Technology Corridor, where there's lots of local industry and opportunities for both students and graduates after you receive your degree. We're also only 18 miles from DC, which can be reached directly via the Metro Red Line at the Shady Grove Metro Station, which is only about 4 miles from campus. USG is considered a full-service non-residential campus, which means that you have access to all of the same resources and services that you would have at a traditional university. There are just no dorms. It's non-residential, so commuter only. Here is an overview of the 9 universities that are partnered at USG, all of them in the University System of Maryland, UMBC, of course, being one of them. And this is a map for your locational reference. Universities at Shady Grove is located about 40 miles from our Catonsville campus in Baltimore County. So as you can see, that campus is much closer to Baltimore, whereas ours is right outside of DC. So at USG, if you were to pursue a UMBC degree, you are earning a true UMBC degree. There's no asterisk or addendum or anything like that that indicates which campus you took your classes at. It's really the same curriculum offered just at a different location. On this campus, you have access to all of the same resources, again, as I said, that a traditional campus would have, as well as still having access to UMBC's Catonsville campus resources as well, including things like career prep, counseling, and scholarships, which I'll get a little more into in a second. At USG, you're paying the same tuition rate that students who are taking courses at Catonsville do. The only difference is the fee structure is slightly different due to the facilities offered at each campus. When it comes to scholarship opportunities, as a UMBC student, you of course have access to opportunities through UMBC's scholarship portal, which is called Scholarship Retriever. And on top of that, you also have access to USG's scholarships as well, which are only for students enrolled at Shady Grove. So really by being at this campus, you have almost twice the amount of scholarship resources than students only studying at Catonsville. This is an overview of the degree programs that UMBC offers at USG. This includes our 8 undergrad programs, our 4 graduate programs, of course, including our MS in cybersecurity, and we also offer several post-baccalaureate certificates related to these 4 graduate programs as well. As a special highlight, I'd like to cover our regional graduate tuition rate. So for those of you who may or may not be aware, the tuition rate does differ whether you are considered a Maryland resident or a non-Maryland resident. Students who reside in Maryland are typically charged lower tuition rate. However, because of our regional tuition rate, students in specific neighboring states and counties are eligible for in-state tuition even if they don't reside in Maryland. This includes DC, Delaware, and the listed counties for Pennsylvania and Northern Virginia. And the link at the bottom of the page there is for if you want any more information about this. Now, again, our event today is in support of our MS in cybersecurity. So this slide just is an overview of the program, sort of as a high-level overview, including the 6 core courses that are required to complete the program. and then some of the rotating electives that we offer, of which you'll need to take 4 to complete your degree requirements. The cybersecurity program is a Master of Science, just got updated the last few years. And then we offer 2 graduate certificates in addition to this master's, and that is our strategy and policy and cybersecurity operations certificates. If you want any more information about this, academic questions can be directed to our graduate program director, Dr. Sherry Oddie, and his information is there. And any admission questions can be forwarded directly to our Shady Grove professional programs team, and our contact is there as well. And if you would like any more information, we also encourage you to fill out our Contact Us form, which this QR code will take you to, as well as that first link there. If you have any questions, you can put them on this form and we'll get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. And completing the form will also have you entered into our system to receive more information about upcoming events and deadlines and things like that. And again, we've linked our Shady Grove email as well. If you would just like to shoot emails directly with any questions you have, that's perfectly acceptable too. So I'm going to stop sharing for the moment, and I'm going to introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Gini Khalsa, who is one of our adjunct professors for our cybersecurity program here at UMBC Shady Grove. So prior to his current roles and responsibilities, Mr. Khalsa was an information technology professional at the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, or the NCCOE, within the Information Technology Laboratory of the National Institute of Technology. He led the NCCOE's academic engagement program, oversaw their information technology infrastructure, and was the system security officer. In addition to his regular duties, Mr. Khalsa mentored rising seniors from local high schools during the NIST Summer High School Internship Program and mentored senior high school students who chose to volunteer for the full year in the NIST Student Volunteer Program. Prior to his work at the NCCOE, Mr. Khalsa worked in the ITL's Computer Science Division within the Security Testing, Validation, and Measurement Group for more than 4 years. So that's everything out of the way from my end. So now I'll turn it over to our speaker to begin his presentation. So thank you.
Thank you for that great introduction, Chris. It is my pleasure to be here today. I've asked some of my former students and, sorry, not my former students, my present students from my Tuesday class, which is networking, basics and foundational stuff, and our Saturday class, which is partly why they're also here to continue to get credit for that. That is the Cybersecurity and Distributed Systems course. And so as we talk about the topic today, it's about databases and how we deal with some of the access controls side of things. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me just a moment here. I've got a ton of settings here that are part of my system. It's giving me a choice to pick screen 1. That should be the only screen, but that's fine. I'll just do the entire desktop. So let me know if you guys can see a couple of things. You should be able to see the slide deck that says Database Security Access Control. If you can just show a thumbs up, that'll be great. I see that. Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. So again, I am an adjunct here with Dr. Shariati's program. I am not at NIST anymore. I am with the IRS, but today's session, I do not represent the IRS. So I am here to represent UMBC. All right, thank you. So why do we need database security? That's what we're going to talk about. The different kinds of users we might have. Hello? The different kinds of users we'll have. Principle of least privilege. What the heck is CRUD? And more. And then we're going to use the structured query language, which has some acronyms that go with that. That's data definition language and data manipulation language. We'll use some of those commands to manage our database and query some stuff from there. And then we're going to do all of that through a demo through the MySQL Server product. It's the community edition that is free for use for learning and so on and so forth. The enterprise edition requires licensing, so that integrates with an organizational infrastructure and so on. So without too far into this process, what are some databases examples that you might know that you've interacted with? Just think of that out loud in your head and just paste that into the chat. Examples of databases that you've used. Don't provide anything that you're using at work, but we don't want to do that and compromise our organizations here in this chat and this session. And then what should folks be able to do with the data in those databases? And what data breaches can you think of which have had considerable impact on the need for database security? So think about those as we start going through some of this, and paste your responses into the chat. So what do you guys think? What are some examples of databases that you know of? Okay. iPads. What is iPads, Sebastian? Integrated post-secondary education data system. Oh, wow, that's a mouthful. All right, very good. So some of those systems might collect data about us as we're using WebEx. This data that we have of registrants and participants and presenters, all of that can be stored in a database. The courses that you're taking, the things that you buy at a store, all of that relies on massive databases and so on, and to keep track of, but to do metrics and analysis and so on, so we can do decisions based on that data that we collect. And then so based on the next question is, what should folks be able to do with that data? Think about, are you the data user? Are you the data owner? Are you a software developer? Exchange databases needs lots of security. Absolutely, Michael, and so on. So as we go into this, let's take a look at some end users. This is just a small sampling of the different kinds of users we might have. Sorry, go back one. Human resources. So all of our personnel data, right, resides within an HR system. And that may include benefits, it may include health insurance, it may include your PII. And so, rightly so, there are certain things that we might want to protect. If you're doing research and development in an organization, I just lost my WebEx there for a moment. I don't know why it did that. In any case, some weird things happen with WebEx every now and then. So research and development. So you might be building projects and systems and components, and you might need to track all of those assets and the projects and who's working on those. There might be some classified content that you might be working with, and only certain groups of people may have access to that information until it's released, but then there's trade secret content. IT, all of the assets that we have in our organization, we deal with security as part of this program is all about. And we need to identify all the assets that we have. And the assets are not just computers, it's assets are applications, assets are people, assets are the systems that those applications run on. And therefore, we need to identify any weaknesses and vulnerabilities so we can properly ensure that those assets are maintained and secure. Accounting, okay, that's where my life started off a long time ago as a student at a community college. And the first application we built in class assignments was to deal with data going into a system and being processed for billing purposes and so on. And so we needed to generate reports and such. And so that was the beginning for me, at least, in understanding what we do with databases. There will be software developers and system developers, and what should they be able to do? Applications. So, you use an application today. We used WebEx. We logged into WebEx, and we got to see, that we want to join a meeting, we want to attend a meeting, we want to start a meeting. And so those applications may not directly allow you to write the code, but behind the database might be functions that they get to execute rather than giving people direct access to the database itself, and so on. And then we've got database administrators. So again, this is just a sampling of different user types. And then we talk about what should those users be able to do with the data, okay? And in what environment are they going to be doing this in? So if we're doing it in our development environment, so what I'm going to be demonstrating shortly is pretty much my development environment. It is an environment to play around, experiment, design, test some of my code or my applications or my database design. And through that process, I don't work with production data. Okay. And so what kinds of things should different users be able to do? Should end users be able to access a development environment? So we have testing and we have staging and pre-production and production environments. So part of good security habits addresses these concerns. And so think about, where users should have appropriate access and what they should be able to do. All right. So a lot of the work that we do with databases uses a language, and that language is known as the structured query language. So it is an English-like command structure. And so we talked about what is called CRUD. And so CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete. Okay, so we should be able to create some objects. We should be able to read some data from those objects. We should be able to update those objects and delete. And there's a lot more. Okay, I just have a couple of high groupings of the different kinds of languages that we use within the SQL environment. And one of those is known as the database definition language. And it's what we use to manage the database infrastructure, the structure of the database content, the schemas or sub databases. And then databases are related objects for a particular function. So we might have an HR database, we might have a asset management database, and so on. And then, so we also have users and groups and so on. So all of the database security and upkeep is done through the database definition language and the system management languages as well. And then for users, we have the database manipulation language or the data manipulation, however you want to say that. Okay, is we need to put data in and get data out. Okay, and so we're going to take a look at some of those examples today. At a high level, again, these are just some examples of things to talk about for our demo purposes, is what is that the set of commands. So we create user accounts using a command called create space user and then the username and some other parameters that go with that. We create a schema, and a schema or a database contains those related objects. So if we're dealing with a development environment, we could create a development database. And so that's what we're going to kind of show you today. And we're going to see what happens when users don't have access to things, which is by providing access to users. So we use a command called grant and a list of privileges on a particular schema to a particular username or a role that we might have and so on. So we're going to just focus today on users rather than roles, because that's another whole set of advanced, related topics that if I believe there's a course at UMBC that will address database management, and so you can take that accordingly. Getting rid of the database object. So if we grant too many privileges to the wrong user, they can wreak havoc in our environment, and so we want to be careful about that. Then we'll look at DML, which is the manipulation side, is creating tables, putting data in, getting the data, and updating it, and then deleting it. Okay, so I have basically a demo environment here. On my one laptop, I did all of this initial prep using Oracle VirtualBox, using MySQL, and Microsoft's operating systems for evaluation licenses for Windows Server and Windows clients and so on. The demo when I built this was on Windows Server 2022 and Windows 10. So this laptop is using Windows Server 2025 and Windows 11. So it doesn't really matter. They're a client server model. And so we'll take a look at that. So we'll jump into questions and answers. So I'm going to just switch over, exiting out of the presentation, and show you what I have. So I have a product on my Windows system called Hyper-V. It's Microsoft's implementation for a environment that allows us to manage virtual machines. It's what Microsoft actually uses in Azure, which is their cloud infrastructure environment. And so I have, a whopping 2 systems in this environment. One's called DB1, another one is called Client 1. And you can see I haven't allocated a whole lot of RAM to them. It's just to get it to be functioning for the purposes of this demo. Okay. And so I'm going to jump over to our system that's DB1. And when we work with this product, okay, we have a couple of tools that we get available to us. So when we install this, I've installed it intentionally with the GUI components here. So this is called MySQL Workbench. And through Workbench, we can see we have the administration tab that's currently visible. And this allows a database administrator. I've used just the default user account called root, but in the real world, we would have separate dedicated accounts. So consider the root account as the super powerful system level database administrator that basically configures the entire database infrastructure and resources for the databases and so on, creates the ability to have users and privileges, and they can start up and shut down the database. They can look at server logs and so on. So obviously the system has been running for just a little bit of time. There's not a whole lot of traffic because these are 2 virtual machines. So we're going to look at this, and we can see that we have some client connections by default. This is just the local account running on the system right now. But what we're going to do is you're going to go through here and select some users, and I've used the GUI interface to create a user called Scott. Okay, and so Scott, it was a test account or learning account when I was the first-time employee at the FDA, long before I started at NIST. And when I went through that training, part of the training course materials used a username called Scott. Okay, and Scott was the account that we used to query the database records and work with the database and so on and so forth. But it did not have administrative privileges in the environment. So if I select on Scott right now, you can see, I can specify limits for how many records and queries Scott might be able to execute. And we can see that Scott is definitely not a DBA or a system level or a different function level administrator. So we break up through this principle of least privilege various roles and functions that user accounts may have. Okay, and this is good practice because you might have, a very large organization and you might be responsible just for doing user administration. And as such, we don't want you to muck up, the rest of the environment. Uh, so you see that there are global privileges. Again, I showed you just a sampling of some of those accounts. And then we have what are schema privileges. So you can see right now, Scott has not been granted any privileges whatsoever to access anything. But can Scott log on from another system? And that's where we have our other virtual machine system called client. And you're going to see I'm running on this system 2 tools. One is the MySQL Workbench, and the other one is the command line equivalent of something called MySQL Shell. So Oracle and MySQL would like users to start using these tools so that they're a little bit easier. So you can see before I can, you know, talk directly with the database system, I've got to connect to it. So I'm going to specify that I'm going to log in as Scott at a system called DB1. And in this case, mine is just GK demos. It's a domain that doesn't really exist on any infrastructure. So it's going to prompt us for a password. So I'm going to type in the top secret password. So if you ever take the training, it's going to be Tiger. All right. But if you ever set this up yourself, you can do the same thing. So I'm going to just type in Tiger. That hasn't changed ever since when I was a student. So it's, MySQL shell is going to ask us do you want to save this password locally? And, I personally don't like to save passwords in local systems because you never know, something with greater power may be able to retrieve those files and eventually go through a decryption process. And then we have a bad day. So as you see here, I'm connected now to db1gkdemos.local. This is actually so by using MySQL shell, it will incorporate SSL and use built-in security to encrypt all of the network communication between this node and my server node. Okay. And so the good thing about that is we have built-in protection, right, for the data in transit part of the security side of our world. Now, if you can see, it says no default schema has been selected. So let's see if Scott can run some SQL commands and show what databases might be there. So they don't have a command that says show schemas, but it's show databases. And you can see by default, there is an information schema and a performance schema. That's for the overall management of the MySQL environment and how performance is doing and so on and so forth. So Scott really doesn't have access to other stuff. And what other stuff is there? Well, let's look at the server side. And we've got the schema. And in this case, we've got a world database, and it contains some tables. Okay. So as I expand that, you can see there's a table called city, country, and so on. But there's also a system database, and that contains the overall configuration and management data about MySQL. But we have a Sequila database, which is equivalent to a database for movie and film information and so on. So this is a sample database that's provided by MySQL during the installation process. So I went ahead and installed that so you can just directly see that we have some content there called Sequila. So if we look at this data, right, we can execute the data and we can see that the root account can in fact see some data. But if Scott attempts to connect, so let's see what happens from this other system, right? And so Scott attempts to use a database called Sequila. And it says, I'm sorry, Scott hasn't been granted access. So part of that principle of least privileges, should every user have access to every database out there? And when we talk about data breaches, okay, is what happened in an organization? What kinds of users and groups and roles did people that the database administrators or the application administrators create that inadvertently, perhaps, or through misconfiguration, allowed the wrong sets of users to have access to data? Okay, and that will be critical in our organizations as we plan and design that. So now I want to go through and actually grant access to Scott to see if we can, in fact, query some data. And so we can do it two ways, right? I can come over here and come to administration, and through point and click, I can simply come to users, find Scott, and come to schema privileges, okay, and choose add an entry. But I can also do that through the SQL command structure that we have. And so I'm going to do that real quickly. So I've got a command shell already set up here. You can see I'm logged in as the root user. Now I can't log on as the root user on the database server remotely because of security concerns. We wouldn't want the super user, in essence, to be able to access the database administration side from a remote system, unless you had a management system or a privileged system from which you do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify that I want to grant. So it doesn't matter whether I capitalize, okay, or not. So MySQL is case agnostic, if you will, but in certain cases, case does matter, and that's when we put things in quotation marks. But we're going to say grant, and let's just say I want to grant select. Okay, so select allows us to query the data, as you saw what happened when I said go get the data out of the system as the root user. So I want to grant select only on Sequila dot actor. Okay, so this specifies the database name or the schema name and the table name for which we're granting access to. Okay, so we want to grant a particular privilege to a user. Okay, so we're going to grant some privilege. Okay, grant select on, sorry, typos here, Sequila to a user known as Scott. Now, MySQL is very particular about the format of the user Scott. So we have to follow their construct. And that's where you read the product documentation and understand how things work, which is part of our job in our world. So we're going to specify Scott. And Scott, in our case, is able to log on from any workstation or any system in our organization. Now, in the real world, I likely wouldn't do this, okay, because in this case, I have only two systems. So it's saying log on either locally at the database server or log on from another workstation. So if I don't put in a wildcard, this is a wildcard known as anything. But if I wanted to say maybe anything at, my organization, okay, and that would be okay. Okay, and I really wouldn't specify star, but I would specify percent. Okay, so if they log on to any systems in our organization that are in our domain name, then that's the place they would be able to log on from. And then again, we have to be careful is if you're in R&D and you access HR, then should you be able to do so and so on. So we're just going to clear that out. SQL is very particular about how you end the command line. So we're going to put in a semicolon, and that signifies that we are terminating the command and go execute. So it tells us, hey, the query is okay. And so if I now were to go back to the GUI and view on Scott, and after I refresh, I might be able to see, right, in this process what happened. And I'm like going to schema privileges, and I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on, right? I don't see it show up here. Well, I'd have to go through and flush our privileges in our system. So whenever I perform grant commands, I need to run a command called flush privileges. And what that will do is make it effective rather immediately. And let's see what happens when we go to our client system now and try to use the Sequila database. So I'm just going to press the up arrow, and it says, hey, the Sequila is now accessible. And so we have a command to say, show me all the tables that exist in Sequila. So we just simply type in \SQL show tables, because I don't know what's there, right? So if I execute that, it's going to say, yeah, I only granted you access to actor. You don't get to see anything else. Okay. And so you don't know what else is in the database. You don't know that there are, the HR set of tables and movies and films and all the other things that we saw. So because I said select, let's find out what we can do. So we can query through SQL, select. So select is our command, right? That says go retrieve. And maybe I don't know the column. So I'm going to say select star, and star is just asterisks, okay, from the table called Sequila, rather actor. And again, I need to terminate that with a semicolon. And you see, 200 records that are in this sample database, okay, and sample table. And so as we scroll through this list, we will find at the very top, okay, several sets of fields, right? We see that there's something called actor ID. We see a first name field, a last name field, and when it was last updated. So all I can do, and Scott doesn't know this yet, but suppose Scott decides to be the malicious user and says, I really want to update this record for Ed and change Ed's last name, okay, from Chase to Jones. So let's find out whether Scott can in fact do this. Okay, so we're going to just come to the very bottom, okay, and you'll see that one thing I personally don't like about the MySQL shell is it keeps putting all this text all the way out here. So some of our text is going to scroll, but we're going to do an update command. So SQL, okay, and then we're going to say update the table called actor, okay, and we want to update the actor table and do what? We want to set the last name field equal to Jones. Now you can't see that yet, so I'm going to scroll here so you can see what I'm typing. So we want to set the last name field to equal to the letter Jones, or the word Jones. And because I've capitalized it and I want to maintain because it's a text field, okay, I need to put that in quotation marks or apostrophes, however you want to look at that field, okay? And if I do this right now, it's going to update everybody. And so I want to be very careful about that, right? As I don't want to update everybody's last name to Jones. That would be just a nightmare. And so I want to find that first record. So, well, which one do we want to do? Again, because I've now scrolled, let's say we want to change Mary's last name to this record. Now, because this table contains an identifier, all I have to know is the unique record identifier. Okay. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to pick 198. So in order to pick 198, that happens to be a field called actor ID, right? So remember when I scrolled all the way through here, right? It was called actor underscore ID, right? So we're going to come back down, okay? And we want to see, right, that we want to update this field where, so notice it says the structured query language is just English-like. So I'm going to just say update this person where the actor ID equals 198. So I'm going to put in 198. Now, in the previous example here, you saw last name, I put a space. Here, I didn't put a space. That's perfectly okay. But, syntax-wise and visual appearance-wise, you want to make things so that they're easier to read. And it says, hey, congratulations, there's a problem here. You were not allowed to do this task. So the privileges, right, as part of principle of least privileges, that doesn't matter. So Scott's now getting upset and saying, you know what, if I can't update the data, maybe I'll just delete the data. So maybe I'll just say \SQL delete from actor where record ID or actor ID equals 198. So I'm just picking the same one. Okay, so 198. And it says, I'm sorry, your delete command didn't work either. Maybe I couldn't delete that one record. Maybe I tried to delete everything. So if I just say \SQL delete from actor. Now, if I don't put any parameters, it's going to try to delete all the records, and obviously it can't. So update doesn't work, delete doesn't work. Well, maybe I can add a record. Okay, so if I want to add a record and put something else in, so let's do that. Let's put in SQL insert into actor, and I don't know whether these fields are required or not, but let's find out. So I'm going to put into actor these values. So I'm going to create maybe record ID number 201. Okay, so I got to specify 201. Okay, and then we've got their first name and last name, right? So we need first name. So we're going to put in, let's say, Harry. And then maybe we put Anderson. And then we need, a last update. Well, I don't know what the last update value is, right? I'm putting this in today. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll here so you can see what's happening. So if I don't know the date that I'm going to create this record, I'm just going to do that. And I need to now specify into this actor table just the fields I'm interested in. So I'm going to put in actor ID, comma, first name, comma, last name. And so when I finish that off, let's see if it will allow me to then insert some data. And it says, I'm sorry, you can't do insert either. So I can't update, I can't delete, I can't put stuff in. All this user has is read-only access, in essence, to one table. Okay, so principle of least privilege works. Okay, and because the database administrator is monitoring, hopefully, all these logs, right? These failures, they will show up in a log somewhere, all right, on the server side, and they'll be able to see what happened. So let's go make some stuff happen. All right, so we're going to go back to our server. Okay, and come back to this command line. And so what should we have to do to grant access to Sequila for Scott? What else should we give him? What other privileges should we give him? Should we give him update and delete? Why not, right? Give them insert also. So we can simply come in and say grant update, insert, delete, okay, on Sequila dot actor to Scott at %. semicolon. And it says, okay, I've done that. So now let's see what happened, right? I need to flush the privileges. So I do that. And now on the other side, we can come to this record and, see what happens. And look at that. The insert command works. It says 1 row affected, right? So if I said SQL select star from actor, what can I do this time? I can specify where actor ID equals 201. Okay. And I wish this would scroll for me automatically, but it doesn't. But that's okay. All right. And we're going to hit semicolon. And we see that it got put in. So notice I didn't have to specify a last update for this. It created it on its own. That's a field that's auto-generated based on what are called database triggers. So when a record gets created, it will set it to the last value. If I went to do that update command, so let's do that one. I'll just scroll up. Okay, where we're changing the record ID for actor 198, and we see that it took place, right? 1 row matches, 1 row changed. So let's see what that one was, right? So select 198, right? So we're going to select star from actor where actor ID equals 198. And we see it reflected today's date, okay? And at a different timestamp. So just from these initial set of processes, we can see, right, the system, if we set it up properly, we'll know when records changed. We could add other fields to say who did the last update or what did the last update. Okay, so when we log into, Blackboard, when we log into our, shopping system, okay, whatever the applications you use, those systems know you placed an order. Those systems know you changed an order. And then those systems know you maybe have had a problem with the order, you initiated a return for the order, and so on. So all of those records in a database that are related to shopping get updated reflectively. But if I were to delete the record, so I'm going to intentionally now delete this record, right? So I'm going to just come over here and choose delete from actor where actor ID is 198. We're going to delete that record. And it said, you tried to delete this record, but it belongs to a parent record because this user didn't have access to all of the other tables in order to delete the record because that actor may have participated in films and other functions, okay, from the database that we have. And so it can't do that task. Okay, so we need to make sure, right? How do we protect this? So these are the other aspects of security that we built into databases that you cannot just delete a record if it has children records associated with it. Think about that, right? So if you create an order, if you delete your order, but don't delete the order items, then you have all these order items that now don't belong to a order. And that becomes a problem. And that's also, we help ensure the integrity of a database. Okay, so there's the security side of the database, which deals with confidentiality and protection and so on and so forth, and privileged access. And then there's the protection of the database structure and the record structure and so on. Okay, and so again, those other topics will be covered in other related sessions and so on and so forth. But if you're interested in some of this, please, discuss with Dr. Shariati and the team, and explore this option. Any questions and things? We'll open that up for a question session. Are there commands that give specific? Oh, hold on a second. Could I get that chat? Let me see. Let me stop sharing for a moment and look at the chat list here. I'm trying to open up the chat. There we go. Are there commands that give specific privileges to a user to do certain things to a database, but not alter specific aspects? Absolutely. So as you saw, slowly and gradually we gave Scott access to, query just records out of a database and update records out of a database. Similarly, we could grant a privileged user the ability to actually create tables and not delete them. Okay, so they might be responsible for creating objects, but not deleting them. They might be responsible for creating the entire environment for those applications. So the HR system, for example, you can only query so much and you can only destroy so much, and so on. So there are views which are customized uh, representations of how we look at the data, and so on. Okay. What's the difference between role-based and attributes? That's a very good question, Abru. Um, so role-based access is we define a group of users that have a particular function. So you might, like you saw in the list, was that there was a role for database admin versus a security admin versus a user admin. From the end user side, we could have a role that creates records. So my role in Blackboard, for example, as instructor is I have the privileges to create a course module. I can add course content, but I can't go in and add students into a course that I don't have authority to do. So, organizations implement that through the database control by choosing the appropriate options when they create an instructor for a course and the relationships accordingly. Uh, Attribute-based access takes a look at all of the other functions. So, for example, suppose you are in HR, in a global organization, that HR staff that might be in the EU may not be able to manage and control groups of users' data if they're in North America. So we can say, well, if your system is here, you provide a claim. So you provide a claim about the user, you provide attributes about the object, and then if they all match, we can do that accordingly. Uh, so let's see. Gavin is asking, is there a way to automate backups? Absolutely. I did that a long time ago. A lot of the tools have commands built in, is to run scheduled backups, snapshots, and there are even processes to test restoration without any human interaction. So while I was at NIST, we actually did that. Is the restoration process took place without the user's knowledge, so that we verified that the backups that we were performing were actually, in fact, good, that the machines came up and ran, and then we destroyed the restoration space where those backups were. And you can do that with systems, you can do that with databases. It's recommended we do that. So I see we've got a lot of other questions, but I also have some time here that I'm looking at. So give me a second. I need to just make sure my clock is correct. Am I good for my time so far, Chris and everybody else?
Oh yeah, you're fine. Please
Okay,
answer. Go ahead and answer any questions.
great. Thank you. So let's see. So we've got Sebastian who's asking, I understand why you'd use the command prompt for user privileges, but as a user, wouldn't you want to stick to the GUI? Well, that's a good question, Gavin, or Sebastian. So, there are a lot of things that if you saw through the point and click process, um, that when we go through that environment, it takes time. Um, but I also need to do things through a command shell, which I can automate. So I can, set up lots of processes. So, to have to point and click and pick and choose a role and so on, that's very time consuming. And so what we want to do is either have a scripted process that may have scripts that just simply prompt us, and those scripts would run through a workflow through that process. And we now have management tools that do that for us. Okay. Um, but generally, we go through the command line to make sure that when we're creating users and assigning privileges, that's all done through the command shell. It's far more efficient. It's less resource intensive on the servers to not have GUI environments. So that they're very performant by just going to the command shell. And then you're saying you have relation databases. You might not want someone just adding. I'm trying to see the rest of your message. Adding fields. Yeah, so that's part of, the privileges that when you create a user is for example, you saw that I didn't give Scott the ability to create anything, okay, or to be able to execute any functions that might exist that we write custom code for, which are called stored procedures. So, can you limit users to only using the GUI? Um, so that's an interesting one, right? So by default, when we connect to a database system to manage it, um, that's strictly for the database admins and what are called the application database administrators. And so they will actually create the structure so that the end users will only be able to use the application that's being built, and that's their interface to the database. Uh, a long time ago, we might have given direct access, as you saw in this demo, that I have a direct access from the client directly to the backend database. That wouldn't and shouldn't happen today. Uh, it shouldn't have happened, many, many years ago either. So I know from my, ancient life with FDA, we revoked a lot of those kinds of permissions as NIST came out with guidance and better security. So the database admins realized, right, that, this is the way we used to do things. We went from a mainframe model to a client server model. So think about the connections, right? If you have 10,000, 100,000, 50,000 users in an organization, are you going to allow everyone from their desktop to directly connect to the database? That would be a security nightmare. So the right thing would be to do is build application servers, web servers, or front end servers, and those are the ones that would connect to the database on behalf of the user. Michael's asking, when defining roles for access interlinked to databases, hardware resources, R&D that link to databases of compute jobs for those. Do the defined roles need to have the same privileges between the databases? Yeah, so, if you think about what's happening, right? So if you think about the HR system contains information about all of the HR staff. Your IT system that you go in to do service desk management, or in the case of, Blackboard, right? The folks that administer Blackboard don't really need to see the details of where the student lives and their phone number and so on. They don't need to know what other data they have for the student records. They just need to expose just the student name and maybe a student email, so that when access to Blackboard takes place, you associate the student ID, so to speak, right? Whether it's the name or a unique identifier. And so we create what are called views, and we grant read access or select access to those views, so that whatever other account is going to consume that is the only set of data they get to see. They don't get to see the underlying data. So definitely defining roles is, what is a data creator? What is a data updater? What is a data reader? And a data deleter? And what should happen if somebody attempts to delete the data? And so on. So all that is controlled through the applications we build. Okay. Does that help? Let's take a look. We've got Abru is saying, what's the recommended way to monitor database access? Absolutely. So part of the job is where you have the server administrator, right? By default, you have logging taking place, and you can turn on additional logging to audit all sorts of other functions. So anytime a table is audited, you can specify, let me know if this table is modified as far as the structure. Um, and so on. So anytime we want to see that, that'll get logged into the database as privileged access under the audit trails, and somebody should be monitoring that, or something should be monitoring all logging information. So generally, we take all those logs and put them into a repository for analysis, because what used to happen a long time ago was it was the job of the database admin and the application admin and so on and so forth, and even the system admins to query the audit logs. And so that was part of their job every day, is you check for things that went to cause an alarm to happen, so to speak. And so when we did that, right, it was time consuming. So people started creating security incident and event monitoring systems, SIMs. And that's where as you take the other courses, you will hopefully understand how all they tie together, from system management, from database management, from email system management, you name it, whatever systems we're auditing. Okay. Let me see some other ones that went scrolling by here. We get that one. Got that one. Explain the primary case of view SQL. So Jabril, I think that's the right pronunciation, right? So when we create a view, it's partly what I described. So if I were to go here, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick again. So you'll see what's here from the server side. Okay, so I'll just show it to you from the database server. But we have in our database, in our schema, okay, in our actor system. So you see we have tables. So in this case of the actor table, if we look at its properties, right, you can see that it contains actor ID, first name, last name, and so on. But then there's an address. Okay, so again, this is just going to be their address for whatever location, right? Probably the studio or their agent and so on. So this set of information, so suppose I want to break up, who gets to see the data, or we don't really need to see all of the details about address. We know if everybody's in the United States, I don't need to know US, right, as the country code. So I could create a view of just the address, or maybe a combination. I want to look at actor and I want to associate that with film. So in this case, we create a view. Okay. So view is all the actor info. And you're like, wait, but the actor info was first name and last name. Well, that's not fully true, is it? Actor info is really their address also. So let's take a look at what fields make up actor info. And they're saying, well, it's not just actor, it's also their film info. Well, here's also a customer list. The customer list is made up of the customer, right? So if we look at, there's a store, there's staff, right? And then there's customer. Okay. So what is the customer info? Well, the customer info might contain just, you know, the name of the customer and anything else. Okay. So we might say the customer rented, this film, this film, this film. Okay. So we can combine views of multiple tables, or we can limit the data that is shown to a user. So if I only wanted to see from our table for actor, so let's look at the query. Okay. So in our view, if I don't want to see, actor ID, that's star, right? So I don't need to see actor ID and I don't need to see last update, but I just want to see the first name and last name. So I can create a view. So now let's see if Scott, okay, can create a view, create view. Let's call it actor info, actor one, or actor name. Okay. As select first name. Okay. This is what we want to do. So normally what we do is we have a editor and we can see the commands. So select first name, comma, last name from actor. Okay. So we're creating a customer view. So we don't have to keep typing in star, and we don't want to have to keep typing in select first name, select last name every time we want to see data from the actor table. Okay. So when I do that and I hit semicolon, it says, I'm sorry, you can't create a view, right? Because I didn't give Scott the create rights. Okay. So we do this from the server side. Okay. So we could create a view for everybody and then grant them just access to that. So Scott would never be able to see the last update field, nor would they be able to see the actor ID. Okay. So we can come over here and say create a view, and I can simply do that. And so I would say use Sakila as the DBA, and I could say create view actor name as select first name, comma, last name from actor. And now if I say select star from actor name, where, let's just say actor equals, is it actor? No, right? It's first name equals quote Harry. And that's all you see because I created a view that says, I don't care what columns you query, this is all you're going to see. Okay, there's no need for you to see the other data. So pretend if we had PII in the actor table, you would never see that information. So the directory system in an organization shows you just their first name, their last name, and their email, maybe their office phone number. But they don't need to see the rest of the information about the staff or the student. And rightly so, because that's part of FERPA laws. So once again, security and guidance and governance come in to help us secure our databases and systems and anything else that we might have. Okay.
Thank you, Professor. Sorry to interrupt you. We need
Yes,
to wrap
sir.
up.
All
Thank
yours.
you so much. Great presentation. Excellent. Thank you so much. Chris,
Thank you.
please go ahead and you can wrap up. Thank you.
Sure thing. So again, thank you all for joining us today and for your wonderful questions. And thank you to our wonderful speaker and his very informative presentation. I'm just going to close us out with just a few reminders and deadlines for those of you who are interested in applying to our cybersecurity program. So again, if you'd like more information or have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at our email address or fill out the contact us form for more information. And in terms of next steps for application deadlines in the process, we are still currently accepting new cybersecurity applications for the spring 2026 semester. For a few weeks now, the deadline will be December 1st. If you're interested in applying to next fall, the deadline will be August 1st, 2026. And you can follow the QR code on screen there for the link to apply. But for the process, we recommend reviewing the admission requirements and apply online through the graduate school's link there. You'll need to fill out the whole online application. You need to submit your current resume, undergraduate transcripts, and your statement of purpose. And all of that needs to be received by the deadline for your application to be reviewed. And then we will get back to you within 2 to 4 weeks with your admission decision. So that is all that I have on my side. So again, thank you all for joining us this morning. We hope you all enjoyed, but we're going to wrap up now. So thank you all for joining us.